introduction slide. So I very much hope that this is going to be a discussion with you about what the society can do for its members in the times of COVID. And we, as Chris was saying, we had a discussion with a group of academics about what we could do. So I would like to talk to you about their suggestions. But before we start, I thought I'll just talk a little bit about the different groups of members we have in the Design Society, because it's useful to have the different member groups in mind when we're discussing about what the society can do. So I think one of the big groups we have, and I don't have the exact figures, but probably about half of the members are established academics or faculty who are long-term working on design at different universities. So, and what they get tends to be a scholarly exchange, exposure to ideas. They get intellectual stimulations. They would like to get joint fundings. A lot of it is meeting friends and interesting people, and they would quite like to get some kudos for their own careers out of it. And there is other things which maybe they want from the Design Society, which we are working on trying to give them. So they might overall want to have an increased standing of design research, because we all have to position our own research in our own departments. And then it's important that people recognize how important design is. And we, of course, also need awards and fellowships and things like that for promotions. We might want links to industry, and we might get support in accessing either national or international funding. So about how can we persuade governments to make money available for design, and possibly mentoring is also something that our members might want to get from the Design Society. And the young members, sort of the PhD students and the people who just start out, pretty much want the same things. But I think in particular, what they also want is simply finding other people who have got similar interests and do similar research. And they often also want help with their research, that they often at conferences just catch up with older academics and want to get some advice what literature to read or how to frame up their research questions. And they also want research training from the Design Society, and we're offering quite a lot in terms of summer schools or seminars. But a lot of this now is, of course, difficult to do when we don't have conferences and when we can't meet face to face, and people can't just sort of bump into each other and meet new people. And young people also want a certain degree of matchmaking between industry and them, so that they maybe can do case studies or apply their research. And they want to find other researchers who work in relevant areas so that they can exchange ideas or literature. For young researchers, again, awards are very important because it helps them to find new positions. And they might want to hear about job opportunities and, as I said, get some training. But we also are hoping to expand the reach of the Design Society more to, I called this here the global south, what we once would have called the developing world. So people who come from countries who don't usually have a chance to access the Design Society opportunities because it's expensive for them to get there. And now, of course, we might have an opportunity to reach them. And they would probably, through the DS, be very interested in either getting some mentoring or getting access to funding in the West, or getting the kudos of working with international researchers. And they might also be interested in training for research. And then we have got another group of members which we hope to grow, which is our industry members, so that then they might want from the Design Society to get access to academics to talk about their research ideas, to see new research ideas, and maybe also getting a foresight of the sort of trend and practices that might be coming. And they would very much like to get from the Design Society a sort of exchange with other industry experts or with academic experts, and maybe an opportunity to take part in research. And again, it gives them a certain degree of kudos. And if you look at all of these things, you can see that it's difficult now to do this when we simply can't meet each other in person. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, what we can do to still give value to members and to really support people who might find it difficult to work remotely or to teach remotely or to access things. So we put together an ad hoc committee, which is essentially a group of people who discuss a topic for a certain length of time. So that included Chris, Nathan Krillis, Panos Papalambros, Jean-François Bouchot, and Josef Oman. And we just came up with a couple of ideas, and I've just highlighted some of the ideas. And I leave this slide up, and then we can discuss this. So one of the ideas that we came up with is something around an online event around online teaching and examining, because a lot of people are now working on putting their courses online. And some people find it very difficult. Other people seem to enjoy it and seem to have been quite successful. So there's probably a lot of good practice that we can share, and maybe also a couple of experiences that people might want to avoid that we can share. And there's going to be another talk in 2 weeks' time where the education SIG is going to talk about this. We've also discussed whether we can do online events for students, maybe as guest presentations on a variety of different subjects that they might be interested in, that they would normally either pick up at conferences or pick up informally. We've been talking about having on regular webinars or online discussions like we're doing now with different members, so that we can get that stimulation. We also talked about maybe doing podcast interviews with experienced members to hear about what has driven their research, because we all read classical papers from people, and then it's nice to put a face to that and to hear a bit about the person and where they were coming from. One of the things we discussed is maybe to do an online workshop on how to do online conferences and workshops, because again, people are beginning to do it. We know that some things work well, some things work less well, and it was just useful to exchange some ideas around that. And we thought in particular that when the Science Journal is calling out for another thematic collection, we could have an online workshop to get this going and to just hear the different perspectives that people might have on the topic. Another thing we talked about is whether we could put together links to online design resources, because, for example, I hadn't realized that you can Google lectures from very well-known people like Donald Schöner or Herbert Simon on design and listen to them, and that might also be an interesting resource for us. And general support for members in the community to do online events. We could think about sharing of data and case studies, and the design practice SIG is thinking very hard about how to do this in the moment. And we were also talking about a webinar, maybe with a journalist who actually helps us to learn about how we can promote our research. So I think that is the idea that we had so far. So if you and it would be good to discuss and be very open to any other suggestions, ideas you have, and let's see what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Claudia. I noticed most of you have your videos off, so that another way of signaling that you wish to contribute is if you unmute your microphone, I'll be able to see that and I'll invite you to say something. Another thing to say is that we'd be very interested if any of you, oh, hi. We'd be very interested if any of you have stories for us about things that you've done to contribute towards tackling the COVID-19 pandemic. I know a number of colleagues around the world have been involved in making PPE and in other design responses, and it would be interesting to hear about that if there are any stories from you. Anyone like to kick off a question, a comment?
Yes, if I may.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yes. Hello, Yaroslav.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'm trying to turn my camera on, but it looks like you cannot see me. I don't know why, but I'm trying. I would like to thank Claudia for this introduction, and this is very helpful. I just wanted to mention one small kind of suggestion. As a young researcher in systems engineering and in design science, I would say that one of the things that probably could be added, and maybe this would be beneficial for the younger members, is some kind of session, maybe once per year, once per half a year, for the young members with the practical recommendations of what would you propose with your, taking into account your experience of working with the young members and not only with young members, practical recommendations on how to apply for the new positions, how to find them, how to find the contacts with the right researchers and right professors. I think this is something what might be very, very useful for all of us. So just wanted to mention it, and because I didn't find such a particular line among this on the slide. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Claudia, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think this is an excellent suggestion. This is something that we have never done as such, but it's a very good idea, because I think you're absolutely right. A lot of people are probably wondering about this. And we talked about this a little bit in the context of mentoring, but I think you're right. It would make sense to put on an event for this. So I'll take note of that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, this is Matthew Wettergreen. Can you all hear me?
Hi, Matthew. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, I'm a professor of engineering design in Houston, Texas at Rice University. I want to say that as a design educator, I'm having very intense conversations with my colleagues about how we move design into an online distance distributed team-based situation. And I feel like many of my peers and I are rethinking fundamentally how design can be taught. We run design as a in-person, team-based, physical production process that develops physical artifacts. And when everybody is distributed and can't use the products of our makerspace, we're having to scope down both our learning outcomes, but also our projects. So I wanted to advocate strongly for the Design Society to play a role in helping design educators around the world navigate how to adjust expectations and learning outcomes and projects in an online capacity.
Well, thank you very much. I think this is something that echoes a lot of what people have been saying to us, that I think everybody, or rather everybody, me excluded, is worrying about this in the moment, because it is a big challenge, I think, for many, many schools. And I think the more practical and team-based it is, as you were saying, the more difficult it is to become. And I think that's something that Hillary is going to pick up in 2 weeks' time, and there will be an invite for this at the end of the meeting. I think maybe another comment, I said me excluded, because I'm working at the Open University, which is the British distance education university, and we have been teaching design remotely for the last 50 years. So we have got some experience with how to do it. And part of it is that the team aspect and the skill teaching part of it has never been easy to teach remotely. I think we've tried various things very hard. We've also run summer schools to supplement the distance education that we have. But a lot of the design theory that you've probably come across from people like Nigel Cross has actually been developed in response to the challenges of how to turn something that is essentially tacit and hands-on into something that can be taught and can be made much more explicit. But I think if you're interested, do come to the Design Education 6 events. And I think you also gave a very good explanation of the challenge that you're facing. So I think, again, it's useful if you articulate this, and hopefully one can share some ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hillary, do you want to follow on? But I can't hear you, Hilary. I don't know if others can.
There we are.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for bringing up that point, because distributed design is a very tricky area when it comes to practicalities. At Strathclyde, we have been working with other partners in the Design Society, Eric Bohemia, Ahmed, lots of people in there. And we have quite a lot of experience of what works and, more importantly, what does not work in distributed design. And I will definitely put that on the agenda for the 10th of July. We can give a little case study on the global design class that we teach our students. And we teach them with a various number of partners across the world, so that we give our students synchronous and asynchronous experiences of design work. So we can talk about a few of the things we've implemented over probably the past 10 years. We are now at the stage where we're very strongly relying on things like VR and AR and things like that. So we'd love to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary.
Exciting.
Would anyone else like to follow on that on the education aspect? George, do I see you?
Yes, I raised my hand. I was going to say, I mean, all these points are very important. For me, the main thing that we should really think about is that we were traditionally a society where you went to wherever you wanted to attend classes or to meet people or to go to conferences and things like that. And now with this COVID, maybe that ability to move is significantly curtailed. So we really need to rethink not only our educational system, but also the things that we design, everything that affects the whole society. How should we really prepare ourselves and prepare the society to deal with maybe something that will stay with us for a long time, where we will not be able to just travel as much as we did in the past?
I think that's
Hi, Laura.
I was just can I add something to what
Yes,
George just said? I think it's not just about travel. Like, there's so much behavior change, I think, in general, that's going to be required to live in this new society, right down to things like, wearing masks and thinking more about what you do locally as well. And I think design is so well placed to respond to those kinds of challenges. And I'm really interested in how all of the different research areas that are kind of included within the Design Society can contribute to that, because I think it's not always immediately obvious. And I mean, I work on design cognition, and I've been thinking about how can I contribute to those kinds of challenges. And I guess there's potentially overlap in terms of things like user cognition and that kind of thing. So I think it's a really, really important point that you've made, and I'm really interested to hear more about how all of the different people who come under the umbrella of the Design Society could contribute to that.
Thank you very much. I think these are very good points. I think we probably have to separate slightly on what the Design Society does itself and what the Design Society can do for the society at large, because I think while it's connected, it's a slightly different issue. I think what concerns me in a lot of this is that if you know people already, then you can collaborate with them almost as easily as you could before. Or I find in a lot of ways it is easier because everybody is now at home and slightly more flexible about when they talk. But I think it's a real challenge to meet new people. And I'm wondering how we can facilitate that, because I think you're right that we need to put a team of people together, or we need to find the relevant people with whom we can exchange. And I think any suggestions on how one could possibly find interested people would be good. Because I think one obvious mechanism is to encourage people to fill in their profiles so that they can be found. But whether people do this in practice is, of course, another matter.
Have you thought about, is there any way of running like a survey or something of members to find out more about what they think about this kind of challenge?
I think we've thought about this, but I think we are slightly reluctant to have a lot of surveys because they can be a bit of a pain. They are a lot of work to design, and then you get a relatively low return rate. And I think if you do have a survey, we kind of then have to respond to the survey. We did a survey about 5 years ago about what the members wanted from the society. And I think that has very strongly influenced a lot of the things that the society has done, in particular the open source publication. But that was essentially a huge effort that the Board of Management in particular then put in to make this happen. And I think one of the challenges with surveys is that they raise expectations. And a lot of these things are quite a lot of effort. So essentially, we need people who can commit to facilitate some of this.
Did you have something you wanted to contribute, Matthew? No. Could I just follow that up? I wonder whether instead of surveys, we might make better use of social media of some sort for finding out whether I don't think as a community we make enough use of things like LinkedIn or Twitter, but perhaps we could use that as a means of finding who in the community has shared interests. And a second thing to say, following up what you've just said, Laura, is I think that we don't see enough discussion in general in the public about design solutions to the challenges of the pandemic. And I see everyone when I go to shops and see how they've tried to enforce social distancing. I see the sort of things people are thinking about in public transport. I think the way theatres and other places of entertainment are thinking, all of those are facing design challenges. How do they redesign their offerings? How do they redesign their services? How do hairdressers redesign how they interact with the public? And all the time, certainly in the UK, we hear that we have to follow the science on this, but the science is simply providing means for us to evaluate design choices. But all of it, or a great deal of it, seems to me to be design choices, and as a community, we could be making much more contribution than we have been in that respect.
It reminds me a little of Design for Sustainable Behaviour, which is all about trying to come up with design solutions for behaviour change in a sustainability context. That's what it kind of reminds me of.
Yeah.
But Chris, maybe that's also something that it would be good to share on social media about, and to showcase some of good design solutions, to articulate where the contribution of design is to providing a solution.
Yes. I'll try and write something for the Design Society LinkedIn page and see how.
I think that sounds like an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Because I think if we get a greater exposure that way, we at least have something to point to.
Could we go back to the subject of meetings? Has anyone here joined in a virtual conference of any sort? Any experience? I know that the Design Education SIG is planning EPD, I think, later this year to be done virtually. Any experiences to share with us, Matthew?
Yeah, the American Society for Engineering Education is holding its yearly conference this week, and it's all virtual. It was intended to be in Montreal. There have been a number of adjustments in order to accommodate that. Every session is now 20 minutes.
Yes.
Panels are now 30 minutes, and speakers have the opportunity, instead of presenting live, to pre-record. And I know that a number of my peers recorded their presentation weeks ago. And so it looks like watching a movie together and then discussing it. It's been not without its challenges, but I think that it's an acceptable way to disseminate. I think it's less successful when it comes to the sort of mentoring and communication that happens inside of the hallways that we've known conferences are possible to achieve.
And do you have a feel for how many people have participated in sessions within the whole event?
Yeah, so I know that. So I have a panel that I'm chairing later today on makerspaces, and there are 34 people registered.
Very good.
So you can see who's registered, you can see who's attending, and typically the ASEE conference hosts thousands of people. It's the largest engineering education organization in the world. But I don't know how many people have attended this year. I'd love to be able to report that number, but I just don't have it.
Okay, but we should watch out for that. But certainly that's very useful.
Yeah.
Anybody else has participated in any online event or virtual event?
Yes, I would like.
Hello, Yaroslav. Yes.
Yes, I would like to mention the coming conference, which is IFE PLM conference, Product Lifecycle Management one, which will be held from July 5 to July 8 this year. And the colleagues, they've chosen the Microsoft Teams as well to use this platform for the kind of virtual conference. So that's what I'm aware of, and I looking forward to see how it will go. And also, INCOSI is planning to do it obviously online in July of this year. And the last which I am aware of is the IAC, International Astronautical Congress, which will be held in October 2020, virtually as well. And the colleagues decided to make it free of charge. Out of these three conferences, that's the one where all the participants can join, not only those who present, but also the general public, I guess.
Very good.
That's what I'm aware of.
And could you repeat the name of that last one, please? The IAC.
Yes, it's this is the International Astronautical Congress. It is run every year by the International Astronautical Federation, which is based in Paris, and that's a yearly basis conferences which are happening in different places every year.
Very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Has anybody actually attended a virtual conference yet?
As for me, next week, in 8 days, I'll be happy to share my experience next time we gather together.
And we can ask ask Matthew tomorrow as well. If Hillary's still there, are you able to say anything about the plans for EPDE, Hillary?
Yes, that's been muted. Of course, we are planning, as you say, to go virtual, and we have got the 2021 host looking at teaming up with the Design Society team and the E and PDE team so that they've got a bit of support. Now, there is an Edu Tech Conference on, it was yesterday, the day before, and it's finishing today. And I dropped into 1 or 2 sessions on that. And what we're planning to do is take the same schedule that we had before, break it down into small groups, into small sessions, much like Matthew talked about. We're looking at panels, but we're also trying to give the participants the opportunity to present live or to do a pre-recorded talk. We would like to focus more on the discussion, which quite often it's all about the presentation rather than the good dialogue that we get afterwards. So we'd like to capture a lot of that. And we are at the moment trying to think of things for socializing. So how can we replicate the networking style event or happenings that happen by chance sometimes when we're at conferences, and certainly the opportunity for people to meet up with others, not necessarily physically but virtually. So any tips and clues? And I'm going to be attending a conference in a couple of weeks' time as well, online, and find out a bit more.
Very good. Thank you very much. David Ullman, you're unmuted. Did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I attended a conference, not an academic conference, but one put on by the Air Force about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it had originally been scheduled as an in-person conference for the same week. And they spent about 2 months scrambling to turn it into an online conference. And it was a whole week. It was like 5 full days. And they pulled it off quite well. I think one of the secrets was the presentations were quite casual, like you could see people sitting in their rooms like you can see people now, but the presentations were rather short. They rapidly tried to break things down into smaller group sessions where everybody could contribute. It actually worked out a pretty good networking way, much like the hall talk, but you were able to, one of the things that's always bothered me at conferences, in-person conferences, is that there's other people there you want to talk to, but you don't know who they are because you don't know where the overlaps in your interests are. And this was actually able to steer those overlaps in a better way. So I actually think it was an improvement in that way.
Yeah, I agree. I know you can attend a session as a conference and know there are other people in the room that share your interests, but maybe you don't catch up with them, you don't catch their name. But now we can see exactly who's here, we can hear what contributions they're making, and it'd be much easier to follow up. And by the way, David, it's very good to hear from you. It's a few years since seeing you. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Well, I have sort of a selfish interest in being here. I'm retired as an active professor, but I'm still working at developing educational material, and I'm trying to extend my educational material into an online format. So it's partially altruistic and partially I make a buck at it, but you know how that goes. You don't make the time you put in.
Yeah.
But so I'm trying to understand what kind of materials I can be supplying to people that are useful to them to teach engineering design.
Very good, thank you. So we hope we'll see you in a couple of weeks as well then for the next
yeah, I've
round.
already got that on my calendar. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask you a question about the conferences? Because I was wondering how you felt about, you would feel about going to a face-to-face conference with the current risk of coronavirus in your countries, because you know that we've got design rescheduled for the end of October, but wondering whether people would actually come. So maybe you could just tell us whether in the moment with the given risks, you would actually go to a physical conference.
This is Dave Ullman again. My microphone's still open, so I'll jump in.
Yep.
Nobody in the U.S. is going to conferences that I know of, and I'm actually responsible for a small local conference that was scheduled for late August on a totally different subject, and about 2 weeks ago we finally pulled the plug on that and said no, we're just going to do it next year. I mean, it's one we've done every year for years, but we aren't doing it this year. I think you would find if you put on a face-to-face conference right now, you'd have very few people attending.
Okay, thank you. I think that was my feeling as well.
Yeah. Anybody else? Nobody else unmuted for the moment. Hillary, yes.
Thank you. Claudia, there's also the rush that members of staff who are teaching and have to convert a lot of their material to online in a very short period of time. They will be very busy in October, so that could have a second impact.
Yeah, I think you're right there.
We are going to be going first 3 weeks totally online with the possibility of more weeks online to deliver our teaching at Strathclyde, and that's it could change. It could be a lot longer than that.
Yaroslav, do you wish to say anything?
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to add one more thing which might be useful. I actually attended one more conference, already attended, which is the CDIO conference, which was held about a week or two ago in Chalmers. And this was organized in Zoom, and it worked pretty well in terms of when you could hear or needed to hear the keynote speakers. I mean, the main room. The one challenge that I observed is that you might have, obviously, in the conferences, you might have the parallel rooms, right, where the parallel sessions occur. And it's really hard sometimes to figure out the sequence, because, of course, nobody even if we have 15-minute slot or 10-minute slots, it's obvious that sometimes people speak 9 minutes, sometimes 11 minutes. And when you change the room, sometimes it was hard to figure out which exactly presentation is running. And of course, that's also the case for the physical conferences when we meet face to face. But in Zoom, this was kind of something what could be improved by the platform, I think.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Anybody else? Are you getting useful input, Claudia? Any direction you want us to go in the last few minutes?
No, I think it was very useful input. I think any ideas of how we can foster a sort of informal interaction and people finding other people would be very helpful, because I think there's simply a huge gap of a year's worth of informal discussions and discovering common interests that we'll have. Because everything you talked about the online conferences sounds much more like a deliberate looking for somebody rather than a sort of fortuitous meeting of people.
In the longer term, some of these discussions we've also been having in groups looking at the society's response to the need to be more sustainable, to reduce our carbon impact and so on. So some of these things we've been discussing, looking at what the future of conferences might be from that perspective. I don't know if Daniela wanted to say anything from the sort of ethics and sustainability discussions the society's been having. No response there, so perhaps not. The does anyone have any burning point they want to raise, or shall we go back to Ross and ask him to put up the original slides again and tell us a little bit more, although we already know quite a lot about it, about what the plans are for the future? Ross, if you're there, could you put the slides back up, please?
Yeah, sure, I'll do that just now.
Thank you very much. And to refer to the chat part again, if any of you have comments about topics that you'd like raised, I know, as I said, next one we'll hear about in a moment, but other topics that we've had indicated that would be good for discussion would be on sort of systems topics, systems approaches.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
Claudia, if people have ideas that they think of after this chat in response to some of the points you raised, what's the best way for people to convey those to you and to the Board of Management?
I think probably in the first instance, just email me, okay, and then I can add them to our list of points to discuss.
Okay.
So, first point, I'm sure you're all aware, the Design Society's website is www.designsociety.org, and the site has great many more facilities if you're a member. And there is, if you see at the top, there's a members dashboard that you can log into. I think the next slide shows that, does it, Ross?
Yep, it
yes. Would you like to take us through this, Ross, and what members should do if they want to sign up for particular things, but in particular to be notified about chat room events?
Yeah, so before we had a Google form where you could add your email address, and we would send you out the invite. We've now been able to integrate that into the website. So it's in the same section that you'll find if you want to find more information about the SIGs or be updated about any of the chapters. You can also be updated about new chat rooms as well. So you can log into the website, go to either your profile or the members dashboard, and you'll find a link to My Network. And there you can just check the box that says chat room.
Very good. Thank you very much. And as I say, we've already heard about this, but formal notification that Friday, 10th of July, 2 weeks today, at the same time, Hilary will be leading a discussion on design education transition to online. And I hope from the discussion we've had this afternoon, I'm sure that that will be, for many people, a very important discussion as they're planning how the next academic year is going to run and how their courses should be developed. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions this afternoon. I hope you found it useful. I know I certainly have, and very much look forward to seeing you all again in a couple of weeks' time. As we said, if you do have any suggestions for topics, please send them to Claudia through the Society website, or you can always just let the Design Society admin know, and there are details of how to contact the Society on the website. Thank you again to everyone who's attended, and have a very good weekend. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye for now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.